if Leicester want to win the Premiership, they are not going about it the right way.
Hello, Premiership Rugby is back. Will Exeter lift the title again? Can Sale and Bristol provide some serious challenge, or will it be the likes of Saints, Wasps and Bath coming to nick it? One thing's for certain, this is the Ruck and All podcast. Lads, we're back together. A couple of weeks away. We're back.
True.
Yeah, just in time. 2 days before kickoff. Probably 1 day before kickoff by the time everyone's listening to this. I think this is the one thing that unites us all, getting into some Premiership rugby.
It's what we're warming for. The Aotearoa competition was a bit of fun, but we're just up for this one.
Oh, it's all about them. It's all about the Premiership. I do like listening to the other podcasts, and poor old Super Rugby AU doesn't get a mention on anything, so we're at least doing that well. Just before we sort of get into the outline of the pod, how are you guys feeling about the Premiership restart? Like, buzzing about it, or could we have does it need to happen? Could we have just gone straight into the next one? Like, what do you think?
This could be a very, very long answer.
Oh,
here we go. Strap in, everyone. Strap in. Get a drink.
Tighten your seatbelts. No, I think in all seriousness, it's like the Premiership should have started. Some Premiership rugby should have started either now or maybe the beginning of September. Either way, be it the end of this season or the beginning of the next season. So it's really great that they can get started, because they've had all this time for players to rest and get fit again. All these teams are now back up to full strength. There's not going to be any international rugby for a good extended period now. So it's that they can get the Premiership going, and we can see all these teams at full strength for the longest period, I think, ever. The longest you would normally get teams between international windows or European games is about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So this is a really once in a decade opportunity to see the Premiership as the pinnacle of Northern Hemisphere rugby. It's really exciting. Obviously, there's a huge amount of off-field stuff that we probably won't go too far into. Exeter, the decisions they've made about Black Lives Matter, all that kind of thing is probably not our forte. But as far as the rugby is concerned, it's fantastic.
I think we can. What other podcasts? Obviously, they've got the pros on there, and they're great, and we listen to all of them. But I think the purpose of us doing ours is we're coming at this from a purely fans point of view. And again, whatever we say is our opinion, and that's, and people are entitled to that at all. But from a fan's point of view, we're now going to get 12 months of just pure rugby. Like, there's going to be no breaks. We're not having the Premiership Cup. We're gonna talk about squads in a moment, and squad depth. Is going to be massive, because with these midweek games that are going to go, then we're going to go straight into Europe. Then we're going to go straight into the international window. Then we're going to go straight into the next season, and then you've got the Lions, and then there's a tiny break, and then we start again. We're just going to have tons and tons of rugby to engage in.
It's good. It is good.
You're not worried that there's going to be loads of burnout?
Yes.
Hugely.
Which I think, if you're a Saracens player and you're wanting to play for the Lions, you just can't wait for next season to begin.
Perfect opportunity for them, isn't it? And we were talking about this briefly the other day. It does completely play into Sarri's hands kind of yet again, and they seem to always get the green and all these things. But yeah, something as an S&C coach, obviously one of the things that I think about with my kids, and how do we make sure that they stay motivated and stay healthy throughout the entire season. But when, as you say, and season's 12 months long now, potentially, one of the things we always hark on about at schools, and certainly at my school, is diversification of sports. And it's different when you're a pro, but playing one sport or playing anything really for an entire year or something similar to that just isn't it's just not healthy, and it's just not sustainable. So it's going to be, squad depth is going to be huge with everything that happens. And I think S&C coaches are going to have to work their socks off to try and plan some sort of rest and recovery in between these things. But interesting to see how it plays out.
Wasps in 5th to Gloucester in 9th. That's that's 2 wins. That's what, 8 points, 7 points. So there is absolutely no guarantee that any of those teams, really, other than Exeter and Sale, I would say, will finish in top 4. The top 6 could be almost anybody, if depending on how well this restart goes. So while I think a lot of people will be worried that without this jeopardy of relegation, that probably, I think if we're being realistic, Worcester and Leicester are not likely to challenge for that top 6. But pretty much every other team is genuinely competing for something. Exeter, Sale, Bristol and Northampton really going for a first Premiership win in a long time. Some of the other teams trying to get into top tier of European competition for the first time in a while. We could have been in a position where you'd be afraid for there being really nothing to play for. It's just something to get the TV deal satisfied, get Exeter their first Premiership title ever, just sort of tick off a few boxes. But I think there should be enough competition here that it'll be really exciting and teams will be really going for it.
And it's also like we've got a mini season, and we're gonna go through what the outline of the pod is in a moment. But we've got signings that have come in. Some signings that some teams have made aren't going to come until into next season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how those play out. But basically, what we're going to do with this podcast is we're going to go through each team one by one, spend a couple of minutes on each, just talk about the key signings they've made in ins and outs, and then discuss maybe a couple of issues that have come up in the time that we've been off. And as I said, we discussed Saracens and potentially stuff around Exeter. If we want to get into it, we can get into it. But let's start in alphabetical order, because I like things going in alphabetical order. We'll start with Bath. Bath are currently 6th. And let's hand over to the resident Bath fan, Johnny Sheldrake. Take it away. Talk to us about Bath.
Bath, yes. I think they'll probably be 6th at the end of the season. Can't see them moving too much. Big loss first, and it's a shame he didn't get the send-off he deserved, because he's been a great club servant, was Francois Lowe. And he's kind of been, we haven't lost too many players, really. We've got rid of some kind of older players, Matt Garvey, who had kind of had his time at Bath, and kind of Tom Homer's gone back to London Irish, who I think I'm quite sad to see go, because he was great cover for Watson when he was on international duty. But I think it's actually worked out well in terms of transfers for us, because we've had Ben Spencer come in from Saracens, and I've been harking on for years that Bath have been missing a 9. Chris Cook has moved on to Bristol, but unfortunately he's actually just got a back injury, I think, so he's missing the start of their campaign. But Ben Spencer's a great ad. Kept on Josh Matavesi, which was a big one for us, having that solid 12, kind of big 12. And then Joan Schumann, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, from South Africa, who haven't seen too much of him. I know he's got a very good reputation in South Africa and as a good scrummager, which I think will suit him well in the Premiership. But he looks pretty handy. And then we've still I know Falatau's extended his contract, and we've still got a back row. I mean, we've lost Francois Lowe, but we've still got Mercer, Underhill, Tower as a back row. Still not lacking with some decent backups. So they're not looking too bad, but I just think it'll be how they can gel as a team and actually use this as kind of, our season was going okay, as a kind of fresh start like all the teams. But the one thing to note with Bath, this might be from a position of bias as a season ticket holder, they do quite well at home in front of their home crowd. And obviously, as with all teams, you're not going to be in front of your home crowd, and it'll be interesting to see how they fare. And actually it'd be interesting at the end of the season, whether the stats have kind of turned in terms of home advantage, and there's a lot more teams winning away.
Yeah, no, I think it will be interesting to see how the crowds / how that interaction has gone, and how it turns up in rugby, because we've not seen rugby without crowds yet. Obviously, Aotearoa started with crowds. Australia, they're used to not having crowds, so it'll be no genuine. The crowds are not that dissimilar to what
Immediately,
we're
yeah.
getting without the social distancing rules. Not that I'm celebrating that; it's a real shame. I would love to go to any of those matches. It just is what it is. But yeah, the Premiership is the first time that we're seeing teams that expect and are used to and make use of a good crowd see that not be the case. Obviously, we've seen in football that it doesn't have that much of an effect in the end. There was a chance that it was looking like it was having quite a big effect early in when the German football started, but really overall, it's not been huge. The better team wins more often than not still. So that will be interesting. More generally on Bath, I think they could be strong fifth, competing for fourth. They're one of those teams that has all of the players and all of the talent, particularly in the back row and the outside backs, and to an extent in the front row, but they're just always injured or always on international windows. So a spell where they have that amazing England outside back group, Falatau, Underhill, obviously Mercer's there week in, week out, but he should be fit. Abano's fit. This is Bath's opportunity to be as good as they have ever been, or really as good as they've been since they won the Premiership. You wonder if Stuart Hooper is not the coach to make the most advantage of that, but there's only one way to find out.
Yeah. One thing on coaches, what's quite interesting is 8 of the 12 coaches going into this restart are English. And there's the likes of Skivington, Borthwick, Lee Beckett, Hooper. Yeah. And there's a young crop coming through that, give them 20 years' time, there'll be a Dean Richards and the like as the really experienced English coaches. It's quite nice to see a young crop because budget's tight. You're not going to be able to afford the likes of Michael Checker and chuck money at them necessarily.
I think, just picking on your point of like Bath got the opportunity to put their foot down on everything, I agree. I think if they get all their England players out, I think they've got every chance of doing so. I have a feeling with their current position as 6th, I think Bath may sort of go, let's get through this period. As I say, they've had the most injuries out of a club for the last few years. Like they operate on a 45 squad. Sale are operating on a 32-man squad with about 10 spare academy players. Sale have got the lowest injury rate in the last 5 years, or whatever. Bath have got one of the highest. I reckon for them they'll push on next year with that. And did you want to make a point on that, Harry? Because I think my next point is going to take us slightly away.
Sure. Well, no, just I do agree that there's a chance that they will. I don't necessarily think they'll come top 4. But they're only 5 points behind Northampton. That's one win that they get that Northampton don't. I haven't looked at the fixtures that are left for each of the teams, but I think while everyone is in a position, and obviously the league is so competitive that it's quite difficult to get points in any game. If Bath decide that a particular fixture is going to be one that they play their full strength team for, they can win it against anyone. So I think they should be quite good.
Yeah, just to finish up on my point is that I think, and the player that they've been hugely linked with this week, and we sort of talked about this on Sunday, Joe, so we don't need to go too much into it, but we've obviously not seen Harry and Joe since then. But for those that haven't seen, Bath have linked with apparently £1 million a year move for Andre Pollard, the World Cup winning fly half. Obviously, they missed out on Kerwin Bosch, who decided to stay at the Sharks. But Johnny, as a Bath fan, would you like Andre Pollard?
I say chuck £1.5 million at him. I don't care. I mean, he's outside the salary cap. Yes, I would. I very much would like to see him in a Bath shirt. And I mean, we've just got rid of one World Cup winning South African. We might as well get another one in just to keep up the roster. I mean, I think since South Africa won the World Cup in 2007, we had Butch James, then Francois Lowe joined. Now it's Andre Pollardstone. We've always needed a World Cup winning South African in our squad.
I mean, I did laugh when you first said it, and on further investigation, it does seem that the Pollard rumour is a little bit close to not true than true.
Yes.
Won't happen rather than will happen. But looking through the squad, Johnny, do you know who Bath's marquee players are at the moment? Obviously, Lower's just left. I suspect he will.
I believe Falatau is one, and I'm not sure who the other one is because we haven't bought one in since since Lower's left, so we have that spot open.
I think it's open.
So obviously, there is a chance that Anthony Watson, I don't know if he signed a new contract this summer, but if you were going to give that contract to anybody, he would probably, although I guess he's not really around enough to justify the money.
He's been injured a lot, and you've got like a Cock and a Singer.
Your marquee player for me has to go to an outside international person. For example, Charles Piatow and Bristol, which we'll talk about in a moment, is that person. Mostart at Gloucester. I think those are those players. I just think we potentially move on from Bath really here and just sort of say, just very quickly, good luck to Freddie Burns, who's off to Toyota Injury Shuttles in the top league. That was a move. So great job for him. He's not had a particularly great time at Bath, and I think he was quite public in his walk out of there. So yeah, but great stuff for him. He's been a great servant to English rugby in the Premiership, so great stuff for him. Let's move to the Bears, and let's bring Joe Trickey in for the first time. As I keep reinforcing the point, he is our main centre. Bristol Bears, they're currently third. Is Semi Randrada a better signing, or is they hyped up signing more than when they signed Charles Piatow?
I don't know, really. I think it has been hyped up massively. He's an amazing player. I think we were aware of him before from watching Bordeaux a little bit and watching Fiji here and there, but he really blew up in the World Cup. He had an amazing World Cup, and he was on show to the whole of the world. So everybody saw him, and yeah, from the kind of the word go when he made the signing, people haven't been able to shut up about it, and I would be the same if I was a Bristol fan. There's still a lot of furore around Piatow's signing, but that was mainly when he went to Wasps initially, and then we kind of knew he was around, and then he went to Bristol. Piatow's obviously an amazing player, and they're paying him a lot, which I think he's worth every penny. Radradra is slightly different, but also very, very dangerous. The two of them in one team is just ridiculous. Like, as well as a few other signings that Bristol have made, Bristol fans have got to be so eager for this competition to get back going again, because they really do have a chance, a really, really strong chance, and they're in a good position at the moment. So if these players can kind of hit the ground running from the word go, then they can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I think Bristol, if you're a Bears fan, you've done the best business of bringing in quality. It's well documented, but they've obviously brought in Ben Earl from Saracens and Max Mailings on loan. I think those two players are absolutely fantastic. Ben Earl could have an unbelievable season. Probably Harry will want to interject very quickly on the best prop in the world, Carl Sinclair's move, because he is generally, I think, you can talk about Randrada as the guy who's going to give them the offloading and he's going to make things happen in X Factor, but I think Carl Sinclair with John Afoa at loosehead is going to, and with Harry Thacker at hooker, to be honest, is going to turn Bristol into a Premiership title winning team.
Yeah, I mean, there's not. You'd probably say the only thing they will perhaps struggle with more than most is the intensity and the short running of the games. They're very much a team that is built around investing. If you were sort of thinking of it as in terms of investing your salary cap and you're apportioning it amongst the team, they are very heavily weighted into a core of 5 or 6 absolute almost best in their position in the world-class players, and then the rest of the squad is quite sort of not quite journeyman, but let's say unheralded. Obviously, they've picked up a few pretty good, not that highly rated or sort of well-heralded players. I know Jake Heenan, who did quite well at Connaught, Toby Fricker, who they just picked up from the Welsh Premiership. They've got some of those guys who are not on a big contract are very good, but they're not established internationals.
Yeah,
some teams like Preston can put out almost two lineups of internationals. So Bristol struggle a little bit with that, but I think if they can get into the playoffs, you can't see them. Well, obviously every team is good, but they've got the ability to win any game in 5. They can win a game in 5 minutes by scoring 3 quick tries.
Yeah, just on like the other, they've, as I say, they've made those big signs we've talked about, but also getting like Chris Cook's going to probably come in and play that third choice 9. As it Scheitzer, the guy that he signed from the Rebels about 3 years ago when they first came to the Premiership. He was talked about as being one of their ginger lad. He was talked about one of being a decent 9. Didn't really get going. He's left. So Chris Cook's coming in there. They've also signed Mitch Eady, who's been in the back row for Saints. Again, he can play 6, 7, and 8. You've obviously got Dan Thomas is still there. So they've got the options in that depth in that back row, especially that forward pack is quite exciting. And they've also signed Brian Byrne from Leinster as well as another hooker to back up Thacker as I've forgotten his name, but he's gone to Ealing. They're one of their hookers who was at Exeter has gone to Ealing.
Okay, just briefly on, I know you mentioned Max Malins. He's been quite unlucky with injuries. I think he was injured when he arrived and then got another one quite quickly after starting playing again. So I'm not sure if we'll see him until the later stages of this mini competition, by which time they might not choose to use him. I don't know how long. Johnny, do you know how long he's expected to be out for?
I couldn't tell you, but it sounds like it wasn't. It was a bit of I mean, they've only got a month and a half to come back. If anything, so even if he comes back in a few weeks' time, he's not going to be match fit or have done much training, so it'll still take a bit of adjustment.
No, I agree. So, but certainly Ben Earl brings something that their back row hasn't quite had. That 7 shirt, they never really had obviously Dan Thomas is good and works hard, but they never had a player of the level of Nathan Hughes and Luatua there. So Earl he'll be very, very handy for them.
Very good back row that.
It could be maybe a bit early, maybe for Bristol. I think they'll definitely be in the top 4, and I think when you get to those playoff games, it can be anything. They might lose. They can lose it tightly. They might lose by far. But it depends on how much they gel. If Randrada comes in and does what he does, flip an egg, they'll walk it. Like the likes of Ben Earl, Sinclair as well, as we said. But I would be saying Bristol would probably be favourites for next year's title because I think that gives them a bit more time to gel as a team. And to be honest, my favourites to win this whole thing is they're currently sitting first is Exeter. You have to kind of look at the players that Exeter brought in. So their big player they've signed is Johnny Gray coming into the second row. They've also signed Sam Haddow-Klein, who was at Lyon. Haddow-Klein, just very quickly on him, just is a really, really good pickup. For me, he's under the radar. I've seen him when he played for Edinburgh against Irish about 5-6 years ago. And he's still pretty young. He's still only 27. He just ran the show. He scored like 22 points. He's generally a superb 9. So he's come in to sort of replace Nick White. He's not at the best time of it. He's been at 4 clubs in the last 2 years, which is, to be honest, that's pretty impressive, to be honest. He was last at Quins where he was there for injury cover. Oh, no, sorry. His last club was Lyon there. He had a couple of games there. They've also signed Fungo Cordero, the brother of Sandiego Cordero. And they've also signed Corey Borwin and Aaron Hinley. But for me, and maybe if people want to pick up on this, is they're under the radar signing. And we talked about strength in depth at the start. I think they're generally their best pickup is Josh Hodge from Newcastle, the really young under 20s England 15. When they've got Stuart Hogg's not going to be playing every game, this kid is seriously, seriously good.
Yeah, I think he could, in particular, with this really, really packed schedule, he could be a king of the midweek game. Both clubs rotate the teams. Just has an unbelievable breakout game. He's obviously very inexperienced and didn't play too many games for Newcastle before moving to Exeter. So Exeter, they, as much as they do bring in players who we never really heard of, they're not huge on really young, inexperienced guys. They're very much, given that they're such a system team, they would much, I think in general, they would much rather have a slightly more experienced player playing, and then so they're more likely to play Dolman than Hodge, and then bring Hodge on later on. But given the intensity of this schedule, it's not unlikely that we'll see Hodge starting a game, and he could really be quite special.
It's a shame for Newcastle, as I say, like the team that's recently promoted, he probably would have started most games for them. It's a shame they would have been gutted to have lost him. But yeah, as I say, watch out, Exeter fans. You've got an absolute steal in bringing him in there. Anything else on Exeter?
I'd just say they're probably another team that will do well for having all their. Obviously, every team will be improved by having all their internationals back. But Exeter can turn a little, or have turned a little bit, sort of one note score. I know there was a. I don't know if anyone else has seen the Squidge Rugby video that he did for the Premiership, where he mentioned how Exeter score over 50% of their tries from inside the 5 metre line, be that a pick and go or a maul or a similar starting position. When they don't have Henry Slade or Stuart Hogg, that's kind of all they've got. But when they've got Slade, they have a lot more creativity and the ability to get the ball to, because frankly they do have some really, really good wingers. Obviously Cuthbert's not the player he was, but Woodburn is really special, and I think one of the reasons, and obviously Jack Noel, provided that he can stay fit enough, but one of the reasons that Woodburn's had a bit of a quiet season is that Slade's been injured and then away with England more than he was in previous years. So I think it could be a good opportunity for Exeter to slightly open up, expand their game.
And also, we're playing through August and September.
Yeah.
Not through the depths of dreary January and February. So we're actually probably going to see a lot of running rugby.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think before we finish up on Exeter, I think Yanis Kirsten was a player who was really growing into his role and becoming a star for them. I think a bit of extra time. He didn't have a huge. I think he's only played 10 or 12 games for them so far, because he sort of came in towards the end of the beginning of this season. Bit of a weird way to think about it. But now he's probably locked down his place in their starting team, and he should be really fit and firing, have a big impact.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on from Exeter, just quickly to talk about their system. My brother plays at uni there. He's been there the last 3 years, and one thing that's been very apparent from talking to a bit of a name drop, only a small one. It's been very apparent from all the conversations I have with him about Exeter and Exeter Rugby. They play the same system all the way down from Exeter Chiefs first team through all their academy teams and through all of Exeter University's teams, and they have like something like 7 to 9 teams. They've got loads. They all play the exact same system, and it's a sort of like almost like a Moneyball type system where everything is kind of called 3-4 plays at a time, and there are certain plays, and a few pros I think have come out and spoken about this in interviews. They perceive it as quite a boring way to play rugby, because there are a few phases where your job is to just run a line and you're never ever going to get the ball. They play it in such a way that it's all called because they know at some point, if I do this, these men do this, these men do this, there's going to be a hole here. And so creativity isn't really it's not really something that's involved in Exeter Chiefs game. It only really comes about when you have these creative players like Slade, Hogg, Cordero when he was there. And I know that my brother's spoken about the way that Cordero fitted into that mould. It's probably one of the reasons why he moved on, was when he got there, they tried to teach him these plays, and he was just like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to play my own way. And so they let Cordero just do what he wanted. And so he did, and he was a good player, so he got away with it. But that's not the way that Chiefs typically play, which is why they score so many of their tries so close to the line, because they know if they trust their phases, they'll get there and then they can convert from there. But it's one of the reasons why I think that this situation might still suit them, is that it doesn't necessarily hugely matter who you have on the starting team sheet, which is why they've been successful with people that aren't big names. Yeah. Because as long as they can play your phases and play the system, then you're still going to be all right, and you're still going to be not far off your best. So I think they'll still do very, very well with a second string team, and they can just, even with a rotation, they'll still continue to win games.
Yeah, I think, and that's probably why they're going to be the favourites for this title in the first place, because they've got that, that just, as I say, they've got the next cab off the rank type mentality of like, regardless who it is, they're going to play. Like you look at, because we talked about Jannis Kirsten and Vermeulen, Don Armand, who was talked about for the last 2-3 years as being the next England 6, 7, whatever. And it's just, he's just not had any game time there. And it kind of, I had a chat with my brother about this, and I wondered whether he was going to move on. But again, once you're in that mentality, once you're in the team that's the best, if not one of the best teams in England, would you really want to move on when he's at the stage in there? But anyway, what I would say is very quickly on Exeter before we do move on, and it will transition nicely into Gloucester, is usually Exeter just retain a lot of players and don't really have any big outgoings. But I just wanted to highlight very quickly that Nick White going back to the Brumbies is a big loss for them. I think it was inevitable to happen because he does want to go back to Australia. That's a big loss. He's been absolutely fantastic for them. Sam Hill in the centre, their inside centre option. So you lose Devoto and they lose Slade early on. They've got obviously Ian Whitten, and they've got I can't remember his name. He's Hendricks, Corner Hendricks, who's not a bad player. He's definitely become a lot better. But again, these aren't big Nate household names. I think Sam Hill does a really good job, and I think, bless him, he's going up to Sale, and we'll talk about Sale later on with Manu Tuolangi, but he's kind of got, oh, crap. Sort of fancy about playing some rugby. And just very quickly is obviously Matt Kovacic, who was playing at 8 for them with Sam Simmons sometimes being injured and stuff. Great signing for Worcester, and we'll talk about Worcester later, but again, it's a big loss for them. Obviously, he probably had to go. One of them was going to go. And Kovacic's taken the option to go back to his home club. So my main point here is that Exeter have lost some key players in there, which they haven't usually done in there. But on a team that also has lost a lot of players, and also their coach, is Gloucester. So obviously Ackerman went. He's now gone to, I've got them down, the NTT Red Hurricanes, and he's taken Franco Murray, Tom Marshall, Owen Williams, and Franco Mosca with him. Obviously, Franco Murray has resigned with Gloucester and won't go until the end next season. But Tricky, you as the Gloucester fan, talk to us about George Skivington, the new coaching setup. You've got Skivington, Don Waldock's coming as defence coach, and Alex King as attack coach, which is exciting. What's your thoughts as a Gloucester fan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. Potentially, I'm always biased on this, but I think Gloucester's going to be one of the most interesting teams to watch over this period because it's the team that's had probably potentially the most change, certainly in the coaching setup. And from a setup that was that played a certain way with Ackerman, it was clear that certain things were encouraged more than others. They would try to play a lot from R22, were kicking less, a lot of attacking intent, but potentially leak tries as well. So that's something that we were kind of known for under Ackerman, and I think that Skivington is probably going to do something very different to that. One of the things that they spoke about when they announced Skivington is that they were looking for a English forward to be the coach because they felt that they needed more emphasis on their forwards and in their in the pack and in their defence rather than the attacking mindset. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. I don't know a huge amount about Skivington's coaching and his philosophy and everything like that. That will hopefully be apparent in the next few games. Obviously, Johnny knows a little bit about that, being an Irish fan.
Yeah, just very quickly on Skivington. You kind of look at it in two ways. We're not going to debate about whether he was picked up before an Irish, whatever. I don't particularly care about that. I don't want to talk about that. But he's done well. Like with our line out, especially our line out Irish has improved. The worry that you potentially have to consider as a Gloucester fan is what his high level experience is. As I say, Irish have struggled in the last 4 years, and they've been on a downward slope ever really since they lost the Premiership final back in 2009. Yes, he's got experience of getting teams promoted, but you don't want a guy who's got experience getting a team promoted. You want a guy who's got experience of being at a club that's successful while his time at Irish has been spent of we got to win games. We've got to keep everything tight, which will benefit in the forwards-based game that hopefully he might bring in. But yeah, his experience in there does worry me, and it was a bit of concern for me. But I think you don't underestimate Alex King. I think Alex King is probably Gloucester's best signing, and he's the coach. I think he is a player. First of all, he was an incredible player, but his level of experience in there is really good. When you've coupled that with Don Wardock, who's just retired from, I think he might potentially could play as a player coach. He's just come out playing from Newcastle. So, yeah, when I first saw the announcement about Symington, I was a bit like, oh, Gloucester could be going down here. But that Alex King appointment's given me a bit of confidence that he won the Premiership with Northampton at the end of the day. This bloke's got so much experience. I think Gloucester it'll be a transition. I think the next 2 years is going to be difficult, but I'm a bit more confident in them now they've got Alex King in that role.
Yeah, I think the thing we have to be aware of with Gloucester is that, and it would be a really good thing. This is back to all the structural stuff about Premiership rugby that we don't have time for, but with a bit more transparency in how the in player pay and distribution of the salary cap, we would probably have it laid out slightly more plainly that Gloucester are probably running 75% of the max of the cap, given the level of players we've seen leave, basically follow Ackerman out the door. So with that being the case, I think, and this new coaching team, this is very much a look for the process, not the results period for Gloucester, because there are enough matches here and there are enough good, if not great, players in this Gloucester team that they can, and they've had a pretty long pre-season, really. They've had a good amount of time with these coaches. We'll be able to see some glimpses of what this coaching team are capable of, the ideas that they have, and how good Gloucester might end up being in 3 or 4 years. Maybe not with this core. Obviously, probably Ben Morgan's probably not going to survive too much more squad churn. I know he's a bit old, but he's playing almost as well as he ever has. But leaders like him, they've still got Ed Slater. They've got some very good players. We'll see what Cipriani does put together that Alex King. There's enough quality there that any well thought through system will have evidence if they haven't necessarily got the quality to win too many matches. So yeah, I completely agree. It's really an interesting team to watch, if not necessarily a particularly successful one.
And they've done some good business as well. And Joe will probably have the last word on that anyway in a moment. But for those that have maybe slipped under the radar, obviously Matt Garvey and Logo Manopola have joined, experienced second row and front row respectively. It's good because of the players they've lost. Matthias Alamano is a really good pickup from the Jaguares. He's a serious ball carrier and operator. With Jack Singleton also coming across from Saracens, which is a fantastic, absolutely brilliant pickup, like one of the pickups of the year. But again, I'm sort of the under the radar sort of things. But guys, I seriously need to think about is this guy Geordie Reid from Ealing Trailfinders. When Ealing signed him 2 years ago from Melbourne Rebels, everyone was like, how the flip have they done that? Because this kid's like, he was 24 when he came across, got massive dreadlocks, but over the ball, he's seriously good. I mean, he was by far a Premiership player. He should have just probably gone straight to a Premiership. And it shows how Ealing are sort of doing at the moment, but he's a seriously, seriously good pickup. But yeah, obviously their big marquee player, obviously coming in is Johnny May. Thoughts on Johnny May returning to Gloucester?
Very happy. Very, very happy with it, to be honest. I kind of saw it coming a little bit as well. I think I said to my dad a few months before it happened that I could see it happening. With Leicester kind of in the decline that they were in, you could kind of see there were games where Leicester would lose, but Johnny May would still score 2 tries pretty much by himself. And if you're a player in that role and a player as kind of highly regarded as he is, you've got to be thinking, there's got to be greener pastures for me than here. And with Gloucester, we're always a happy hunting ground for him and a home for him. He was with us for quite a long time, and he's a big fan favourite. So I thought it would happen. I'm glad that it did.
Also, the other thing is, I think he's had an interview since where he basically said he wasn't particularly happy with the setup at Leicester and kind of regretted ever leaving Gloucester. So, but he was really raring to go at Kingsholm. He just, by the sounds of it, it wasn't a. He was scoring tries, a lot of tries at Leicester, but
I think
he wasn't.
do that in his game. Like, as you say, yeah, he was scoring tries, but I don't think he ever really looked that comfortable. A lot of the tries he was scoring, he would make himself, and that's in part of the way of why he's been such a good player over the last few years, because he's really worked on the things that he's been really good at and got better at them with Eddie Jones in England as well, not just with Leicester. But hopefully back home and in more familiar surroundings to him, he'll kick on again.
Do you want anyone else want to say anything on Gloucester, or should I move on?
Yeah, kind of just to kind of sum up. Obviously it's been a bit of a rough time for us. Certainly there was a period there where Ackerman left and the likes of Moss that were leaving as well, when he thought, oh, fuck, this is only going to go south. But there's more encouraging signs, I think, and there's certainly been good signings in there to replace these guys. So although I don't think our squad is as strong as it was kind of before all this happened, I still think we're in a good place. And yes, it is going to be a period of kind of rediscovering who we are and rediscovering the way that we play with our new coaches. But I still think that we have a chance to kick on further up the table. The one reason that I think we really struggled for a period there, and the reason we're ninth, is because Cipriani wasn't really offering anything for us. And the reason we were so good the season before was because Cipriani was on fire and he was just setting up people left, right and centre. Other players playing well around him as well. But I think that's been one of the key reasons why we struggled. And I think part of the reason behind that was his interaction with the coaching staff. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but he's been really, really positive with all the coaching announcements made. So when Skivington was announced, Cipriani was all over Instagram and Twitter saying, oh, it's an amazing appointment, really forward thinking, really, really proud. He was really vocal about it, and kind of reading a bit more into it and listening to some interviews with the CEO when they signed it. They took a lot of what the players thought into consideration. So they went to the players and asked what sort of coach they wanted. And they asked a senior group of players, and they didn't say who that was, but that's got to have included Cipriani. And that's what they said they wanted. They wanted an English forwards coach for various reasons. Whether that's what we need or not is by the by, but it seems that they really went on what the players wanted, and Cipriani is part of that. So Cipriani is really if he has really bought into these coaches and is in a kind of a bit of a happier place than he was before this happened, hopefully that'll mean that he starts to play well again and the team functions well again. So there's reasons to be optimistic, but it's either going to go north or south. Really, it's going to get better, or it's going to continue to get worse, I think. So really important few months for us.
Yeah, I think maybe the short, sharp nature of this restart anyway will allow Gloucester the time to gel. They just need the time to really push in. Top six maybe is still in that area if they play well, and it will depending each team, if they come out firing and go, then they're in the chance. But I think again next year is a really key opportunity for them to really put their foot down and see how far they can go. Another sort of team in that sort of mid-table could push themselves as top six are Quins. They've done a real solid amount of business. They're currently 7th. Obviously, losing the likes of Carl Sinclair, they've replaced him with Wilco Lowe and also Andre Oosthuizen, we'll talk about in a moment. They're currently still in South Africa due to visa and exam issues with language. I think there's a lot of, I'm not going to get into immigration, all that sort of stuff. We're a rugby show. Anyway, they've also signed Tyrone Green from the Lions, utility back, which is very useful for them. Joe Marchant's obviously come back from the Blues, and I think they were talking about on the Super Rugby Aotearoa podcast about how well James Parsons really thinks really highly of him and benefit his game, which is great to see. Other couple of pickups, they've made a couple of sites. Jordan Eales, great stuff from him, South African-born prop from Ealing Trailfinders. Signed also Craig Trainer from Ealing as well, and also Scott Steele from London Irish as a backup 9. Losing the likes of Francois Sealy, who's a shame, but he never really got into the team because he's been injured. And then Semi Kunatani's a bit of a shame for them. He's off to Castra. big second row, not second row, back row option, but again, never really got in. And they like James Chisholm and Clifford's coming back. And then Gonover again is off to Monda Massan in Pro League. But let's sort of maybe start with Gabriel Ebitoye. He's signed on for the end of this season, and then he's going to be off to Agen. And thoughts on that?
Well, you wonder, don't you? I wouldn't be surprised if it was as completely simple as he doesn't think he's likely to play for England in the next 3 years. Ajon offered him a contract and Quins couldn't match it. I think there's no players, more and more English players, both in rugby and also football, are realising that like adapting to living outside of the UK isn't that hard, and it can be really good for your career to go and be a star somewhere and get a bit more attention paid to you, if that makes sense. Ibitoye will be Ajon's one of their most exciting players, and that sort of level of it's difficult to like put it into words, but basically being the focal point of a team, which he wouldn't really be at Quins, and you don't so much get in English rugby. There's less of that. Really look after a superstar winger. We just aren't very good at that. So I think good luck to him. Go and get a big pay rise, be a star, score a lot of tries in France in decent weather, come back, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just came back to Quins when he returned to England, if he comes back to England.
It could be very similar to sort of Joe Marchant's move to the Blues, where he's going to have an experience for a couple of seasons. He's obviously going to get paid a lot more. I think what I've done some sort of digging and my investigations revealed that he could potentially thought with obviously the pay cuts and the restructuring and stuff, he thought he might potentially have got more money, and obviously Agen are going to pay him what he thinks he's worth, which is fair enough. Like he's a young guy, and he's a shame because he potentially would have been on the England radar in a couple of seasons, but he's got opportunity to come back. I think it's a good opportunity for him to go over and see how he gets on in there. Anyone else wants to sort of any other Quinn signings you think standing out to you that you like the look of?
Be interesting to see Ashton's. Obviously,
Of course,
he's probably replacing Ibitoye, but see how he kicks on, because he kind of was surplus to requirement at Sale because they had to make way for all their new signings. Basically, you kind of weren't going to offer him more and kind of let him go. But yeah, I feel Quins are probably in a bit of a transition phase. They've still got the likes of Kerr and Robshaw, who are in the twilights of their career, and kind of James Chisholm, and then they've got Don Brandt coming through, and they've got some exciting backs, Marcus Smith and Joe Marchant coming through. So I think it's just going to be like this year and next year. I could see just a bit of a transition for them. I can't really see them kicking on.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that this Harlequins team will be they're sort of like Gloucester, but not as interesting. I think they are what they are at the moment. They're not particularly on a journey anywhere. They've got some good young players. They've got some previously good old players, and a sort of squad middle that isn't too interesting. Whereas some of Gloucester's squad players have got a bit more about them, and they've got a very, very different and new coaching staff. Quins haven't really got that. We'll see. Obviously, when Esterhazen comes in, that's starting to be the foundation of obviously with Lasiki's already there, but Esterhazen providing a bit more depth. They've got the makings of a good back line. They've got a bit of a good pack, but not really, and particularly a lot less good in the front row now that Sinker's gone. I don't think Quins will finish 7th where they currently are on the table. I think that they are only going down. They won't finish last. I don't think Leicester will overtake them. They're 8 points clear, but they're not looking that good.
I think Quins are going to get sucked into the. So there's going to be a group of them, the likes of Worcester, Irish, maybe Gloucester, Quins, Leicester, that have got really good first teams, but their midweek second team is going to be a bit of a drop off. Like Quins struggled with a lot of injuries, especially in their back line last year, and they've got some really good players in there, like the likes of James Lang's a good backup 12, 10 if when called upon. Like, but especially in their forward pack, if that front eight goes, they are, and the likes of Semi Kunatani, who was their sort of backup back row, they're going to really struggle, I think, to sort of push on. Again, it will be very interesting to see how the restart goes. How many games you're going to get out of Rob Shaw before he moves to America? How many games is Kerr going to play? There's obviously Wilco Lowe's not come over yet. He was their big guy to replace Sinclair. Marler's got to do a hell of a lot of work. Marler's towards 30 now. He's not going to play more than one game. Yeah, they could potentially be in a particular issue if they get injuries. Could potentially struggle.
Yeah, I think briefly, I know we sort of mentioned a couple of their other signings, but I think of all of them at Quins, I think Tyrone Green on hard pitches against tired players, he'll be really good.
Oh, he's quality.
He'll be very, very exciting to watch, whether they play him at really almost playing any position in the back line. He's quite small to be playing centre, but certainly 10, wing and 15. He played for the Lions and was a lot of fun. So I think they're more see what they can do and try not to fall apart than any like obvious growth. But in terms of just giving more game time to some of these good young players, can't hurt, I suppose.
Tricky, did you want to finish up on Quins?
Just really quickly, and I obviously don't know any of the background of this, but I noticed before we started the pod, I was scrolling through Instagram, and a pod called Fab Rugby. There's 4 of them, and they all predicted their top 4 who they thought would win the championship and a Player of the Year, and all of them, 3 of them, had Northampton, Exeter, Sale, and Bristol in different formations in their top 4. Apart from the 4th person who had Quins in the top 4. So I agree with you guys. I don't think they look particularly dangerous, but I don't know. Maybe this person was a Quins fan, but I just thought it was curious that they thought they were top 4.
Yeah, I do think that the top 6 and the bottom 6 won't change.
No,
unless Saracens win every one of their remaining games, and then
let's.
If you were going to look at it just on wins.
We'll probably we won't predict probably who's going to finish, like concretely go through who's going to finish where. I think it'll be nice at the end for all of us, as I say, do similar to what that podcast did and do pick our top 4. They might be the same, they might be different. We'll find out. But that's very interesting, as I say. But as I said at the top of the show, everyone's got an opinion. Doesn't necessarily make it right. Right. What I want to do next with Leicester is very. Go on.
Speaking of which, London Irish, but actually we have got Leicester.
No, we've got Leicester there, but we're going to rattle through Leicester. Oh. What we'll do is we're going to start very positively with Leicester, and then we'll probably go the other way. We're not anti-Leicester or anything like that, but very quickly, what each of us go round and say, because they've signed a lot of players, they've let a lot of players go because of the and that's well documented. We don't need to be wasting time regoogling that. But who is your favourite Leicester signing? Johnny,
I've got mine.
Yeah,
Steve Borthwick. He may not be on the pitch, but I think that is Leicester's best signing.
I agree.
He's got a very good reputation as a coach, like a very good and like an obsessive, and doesn't take any shit. And he'll probably
because I don't doing a great job.
I think we'll see. We'll see whether he turns them around. But yeah, I want to start with Steve Borthwick. It could be exciting.
I don't know if that broke out, but what I said was somebody to take over from Jordan Murphy, because I don't think he was.
True.
No, my pick would be Harry's is probably similar. Maroney. I think he's going to be a very good signing. Especially they needed him really after Tuolangi going. But he's a great player to kind of get some stability back in those centres, and he's perform well at a high level consistently. So we good to see him in.
Yeah, I think that's probably the sort of hipster choice. Everyone, I think, Johnny, I think you'd agree. Everyone loves Nadolo. Murumuru is pretty good. Not many people have heard of him, but he's a good player. Not got too many caps, I think, was something I was surprised when I did a bit of reading into him. But I suppose when you're playing for some of those French clubs, they're not too keen on letting the players who aren't going to play for the top international teams. They make it a bit difficult for them to fulfil their international call-ups. But I think one of the things that Leicester struggle and have struggled with when they had, so in the sort of previous iteration of this Leicester team, where they had lots of good wingers and the ability to score tries, but then the centres were always quite weird and difficult to see how they would really help the team beyond being a player in a jersey. Obviously, Yako Tauta is good and strong defender, but not particularly exciting, and was quite frequently injured. Eastman has been injured and out of form for a long time, and he's now left. Tuolangi, away with England, or injured, has now left. So no pressure, Matthias, but I hope your English is up to scratch and I hope you're fit, because you've got a lot of work to do.
You can hopefully teach him now.
That's a big hole to fill for them. I think we've been doing our prediction, our 15s, and the Leicester one for me putting together was hilarious because apart from Ben Youngs and George Ford, the entirety of that back line is completely different.
Yeah. I mean, their staples are their props and their halfbacks. They've got Cole and Genge, and then Youngs and Ford. And like, it might be kind of a clean slate, new coach, basically an entire new team apart from your stalwarts. So it could be interesting.
I mean, speaking of the halfbacks, there were really a Jekyll and Hyde team that, with Ford and without Ford, Leicester teams are top half of the Premiership and Championship level teams.
Yeah.
So with him for this amount of time, provided that Nadolo's not young, Murumuru rather isn't young.
How's Moroni? Moroni must not be. Moroni's not.
Moroni's 26, 27. Yeah. He's peak career.
Yeah.
In good shape. Hasn't had any enormous long-term injuries recently, so he should be able to hold up. But I think provided they can keep more or less their strongest team together in a similar way to Gloucester, I think they won't break into the top 6, but they've got enough time now and an interesting enough coaching team for there to be a lot of good process work and process evidence for us to see how we think they'll do next year.
I was just going to say, this is probably maybe the controversial thing we'll say. Leicester have to do well in this mini season or restart, whatever you want to call it, because for me, they're favourites for relegation next year, because it's going to go one of two ways. The Borthwick thing's either going to work amazingly and they'll go bang straight up the table again, or it's not going to work. The players they've signed are, don't get me wrong, I'm really excited to say, again, Nadolo is going to be Clark, but he's a couple of years older than Naira is, and that running at him is going to be incredible when they play Saints. Murumuru, again, to replace Polota now is a big loss for them, but they've got Mamashkashvili from Enzai STM from the Russian leagues. Like, Matt Scott, again, was at Gloucester for a while. Again, is an interesting pickup. I quite like Luke Wallace. Luke Wallace, I think, when he was at Quins was brilliant. Talked about the England radar, sort of dropped off. It's a good pickup for them. But again, these players have to come across and have to start so quickly and so well. Nadolo's not played in the Premiership. Nadolo's played Super Rugby and top 14. Same with Murumuru. Kobish Van Wyk has played, though he's been superb for the Hurricanes. When he was at the Sharks and the Stormers, he wasn't as efficient as he has been. again, he has to hit the ground running. Otherwise, that's a big hole they've got to fill. Again, Maroney's only played Super Rugby. So again, is he going to be able to cope with the attrition rate and the impact? Don't know. There's a lot of unknowns in this Leicester team where they could get in there and go, fuck me, they're incredible. But again, this is why I think they are going to be favourites relegation. Is this Leicester team are playing? If you take Saracens out of this league, and if Saracens didn't cheat, Leicester were going to get relegated this year. There was no other team that were as bad as them this year.
True.
So again, for me, it goes one way or the other. They're going to be incredible, and it's going to be a massive straight impact, or they're going to be awful.
And everyone they've seemed to have signed, they don't seem to have signed anyone who think, oh, you're going to build a team. Maybe Matt Scott, if he suddenly, they're not a team you're going to be like, oh, in 2-3 years' time, you're going to have you'll have George Ford there. Ben Youngs might be retired, and like Genge will probably have gone back to Bristol. Like, they haven't got a team that you're building with that team. They've got some great individuals coming in. The Dolo's not going to play more than 2 years there. And then they're going to disappear. And then you're actually back to square one again. And actually, Leicester have been known back in the 2000s. They were the team that had the great academy, brought their academy through. And there's no sign of that at all. It's just disappeared.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, and really is a key part of what Leicester are struggling with at the moment. I don't know if anyone else is as deep into rugby Twitter as I am, but if you've read much of Ben Darwin, the former Australian international props work on team cohesion, he and part of a consultancy firm that he's set up, they do really interesting work on studying this sort of concept that they've worked out of team cohesion, where the fewer changes season to season and match to match that a team makes. Obviously, this is always quite logical, but in rugby, it's probably one of the sports where it ties up most directly to having a very cohesive team to being successful. So the Crusaders, players don't leave the Crusaders. Players don't leave Leicester. Players don't leave Saracens. So they get good players at the beginning. They play together for 5 or 6 years, some even longer, and they know each other and they play really well. But teams like Leicester, they have last year's Leicester team had a lot of good players. This year's Leicester team have a lot of good players. There's not a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Really. So,
I mean, outside of George Ford, you're probably looking at a whole new, if you were going to pick their starting 15, a whole new backline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all well and good looking at the squad page and saying, oh yeah, they've got a bunch of very exciting signings, but these guys genuinely don't know each other.
Yeah.
Which is right. It's always a problem in any team sport when you have new players coming in and they have to work out what they're doing. It's going to be even harder with a new coach and an entirely new system there. I mean, they can do what we like. We don't know anything about how to run a rugby club, but they shouldn't have signed the Dolo. Murumuruvalo is more reasonable, but if Leicester want to win the Premiership, they are not going about it the right way, really.